Hello everybody, welcome to beautiful Zion National Park. I'm Chase, there's no Joby here, and this is the Overrun. If by now you're not familiar with Subaru's Wilderness brand, you've probably quite honestly been living under one of these very red rocks back here. It is the brand's most off-road, most aggressive preset trim level for a lot of their models. So far we've got an Outback Wilderness and a Forester Wilderness, and this is the latest addition. Now, what makes it a Wilderness? Let's start with the 9.2 inches of ground clearance. Subaru will happily point out to you that that is more than both the Ford Bronco Sport and the Jeep Compass Trailhawk. Now, it also gets Subaru's X-Mode all-wheel drive system, which uses some very clever brake biasing stuff that we'll hopefully get to a little bit later when we get up on some of those rocks. And, of course, there's all of this lovely plastic cladding, some of these nice gold accents here that you see throughout the car, and special wilderness badging. You'll find those on the quarter panels and on the rear deck. Now, let's talk about what powers the Crosstrek Wilderness. Now, this is the beating heart of the Crosstrek Wilderness. It is the 2.5 liter flat four that you'll find in tons of other Subaru models. It's also mated to Subaru's continuously variable automatic transmission, which then spins all four wheels through Subaru's standard all-wheel drive system with those X modes I was talking a little bit about earlier. Those control different terrain presets that let you navigate, mud and ruts and gravel and rocks and whatever other obstacles you might come across during your active, happy millennial family adventures with your dog. Now, power outputs, circling back to that, compares pretty well with the competition. This actually has more power than the Jeep and is roughly on par with the Ford Bronco Sport Heritage Edition that I drove a couple weeks back. That makes 181 horsepower and 190 pound-feet of torque. So Subaru is right where it needs to be as far as power output. Now, let's talk about money, because this is obviously a crossover SUV thingy that's very well positioned in its segment. Subaru likes to really undercut the competition, which it does extremely well here. Those of you that watch regularly will remember the egregious sticker price of the Bronco Sport Heritage that we drove. Though that has true four-wheel drive, it also costs some $46,000. Now, MSRP for this trim level right here is set at a much more palatable $33,290. Now you start to spend some money, get some of the options that might make it compete better with that Bronco that I was in just a couple weeks back, and you're looking at a car that's about $35,000 to $37,000. Subaru makes some nice offerings as far as interior accoutrement and other comfort-oriented features. We've got a nice Harman Kardon sound system, which sounds pretty good. We'll get to that. It's also got some nice synthetic leather trimmed seats. The seat backs can be optioned with a nice little cargo protector so that when you drop the seat backs, you're not messing up any of the material back there. And you can also order this car with varieties of accessory racks, in this case a canoe and a mountain bike. Now, with that in mind, let's talk about how the Subaru Crosstrek Wilderness drives. So, what is it like inside the Subaru Crosstrek Wilderness? This is kind of formulaic a little bit from Subaru, which is okay because we like the Wilderness formula. There are lots of coppery accents to match those yellow, coppery, goldy accents on the exterior. These are Subaru's, they call it Syntex or something like that. Basically, it's like a cloth, synthetic, vegan leather mix seating surface that's waterproof. It feels like a very rugged interior that you could just hose out. We have Subaru's new-ish vertical infotainment cluster that is in pretty much every Subaru product ever. We used it in the WRX. It works just fine. The updated cars for 2023 and on will now blow up your Wi-Fi, and the stereo will randomly come on and completely derail me. That's okay. I said Wi-Fi. What I meant was wireless CarPlay or Android Auto, and it will now fit the full length of the screen. There's one options package on this car which adds a power sunroof, these more nice seating surfaces, and a few other items like the power adjustable driver's seat, which has lumbar support. All in all, it's a pretty comfortable place to be. I don't have too many issues with it. While the waterproofing on the seats is nice, the big problem with that is that you get very, very sweaty. We've been in the car since 11:30 a.m., maybe a little bit earlier. It's now almost 2:30, and my back is so sweaty, it's gross. That's okay. You know, for $33,000, you're not going to get ventilated seats and a lot of stuff. It is what it is. Now, with that in mind, we are here at a little off-road driving course, so we're going to find out just how well the car drives off-road. All right, we are driving the Crosstrek off-road. We are using Subaru's little X-Mode dealio, which uses some clever brake biasing, combined with a beefier rear differential and a shorter drive ratio to let you climb some pretty crazy stuff like this. And then once you're up here and have kicked up a good amount of dust, you will realize that the Crosstrek drives really well off-road. I have good feeling through the steering, which means that I'm able to easily place the tires. The steering is nice and light too, and I feel very confident in its ability to get me through a lot of this other stuff. I'm trying to figure out where I'm supposed to go here and let the hill descent control do the work for me. I'm not touching the brake down this big nasty hill here, and it's doing a pretty good job despite the somewhat concerning clunking noises it's making. It's a little hard to get that hill descent control off, but once it is off and you can start driving again normally, it's a pretty painless process. And more to the point, it works well and it's pretty confidence inspiring. I feel like I can trust it. The ride off-road is pretty good. This has 9.3 inches of ground clearance, which is up from 8.7 inches on the standard Crosstrek, and as Subaru will quite eagerly tell you, that is more than any other competitor, and that includes the Bronco Sport Heritage that we were in last weekend. So far, it has done pretty well off-road, and I feel like I have never hit a point where I'm worried about damaging the bodywork off-road, unless we're gonna count the branch that I definitely scraped the nice green paint with. We're not gonna talk anymore about that. Now, what we should talk about is visibility, because that is obviously pretty crucial off-road. I think it's okay. My side visibility here is not the most fantastic stuff in the world, but I can see where I'm going and I can see over the hood, most importantly, which allows me to place those wheels and really trust the car. Now, I guess since we've kind of exhausted the off-road portion of my driving notes, let's talk about how the car drives on-road, even though we have this very interesting backdrop to go through. I think that it is a Crosstrek. It is certainly one of the cars of all time. It drives okay on road, it's relatively quiet, and most importantly, these Yokohama Geolander tires are giving you good grip on and off road without creating too much noise. It's actually very impressive how quiet this car is at most speeds. Up to about 75 miles an hour, it's very difficult to hear any appreciable amount of noise. The driver assists are very good, and Subaru will tell you that its eyesight system, which is standard on this range-topping Crosstrek trim, the Wilderness, is calibrated to work with a modified vehicle. For example, one that has greater ground clearance or maybe some lighting on the front. Subaru knows that owners of the Crosstrek like to modify their cars. And so as a result, it has calibrated its safety systems and kind of catered the Crosstrek to be easy to work with. It acknowledges that there's a lot of stuff on there that you are not going to be able to change, like the transmission coolers and the other very big steep hill, the transmission coolers and some other items, and as such it has beefed those up. Like I mentioned, the rear differential earlier. The radiator fan is also beefier to tolerate some more abuse off-road, among other changes. Now with that in mind, as we are kind of coming to an I can't see shit, as we are sort of coming to a close here, we are going to cut back so that we can wrap this video up, and I will tell you whether or not I like this better than the Ford Bronco Sport that I drove a couple weeks ago. So what do we think of the Crosstrek Sport? Wilderness, whatever. I think that as compared to the Bronco, I would prefer this. The Crosstrek gets materials right for the price. It also manages to undercut the Bronco, and while it does not have the full-time four-wheel drive that the Bronco Sport has, the all-wheel drive system, as we just found out on the hill back there, is more than enough. And on top of that, I can't really speak on the Jeep competitor because I haven't driven it. So we're gonna leave it at yes, buy this. The interior quality is nice. The driver assist system works well. Our fuel economy is not awful. I think we've gotten 27 mpg combined today, which is pretty good for a couple hundred miles of driving. And on top of that, it's not an awful place to spend your time. There are good options. There's good aftermarket support if you want to get a little bit more serious about your off-roading. There's the crossbar system that will hold just about anything, including a roof tent. You can fit everything in the back, including your dog and your smiling millennial family. And on top of that, you can do it all for under $40,000. It's really the answer right now. And unless I drive the Jeep and it's really just that much better, if you want something cheap that you can take off-road, the Subaru Crosstrek Wilderness is definitely the answer.